such an asshole!
Always interesting questions here at Asshole Consulting. We have one. I don't really necessarily have to answer. I mean, I have ideas. I have different scenarios, but any good economist will tell you when they're predicting the future, they don't have the answer. Nobody really does. But I'm going to take my best crack at this. Dear Aaron, I'm curious on your take on this new thing I discovered recently on accident called Northwest Front. There are videos on YouTube of this guy, Harold Covington, explaining it as well as I've seen its own website, northwestfront.org. The gist is that at the current rate things are going in this country, the USA will fall apart like the Soviet Union did back in the day. When that happens, regions will be broken apart into new countries or nations, and the idea is to get as many white people to move to the Northwest region as possible so that whites can claim that area because everyone else is already going to get a piece of the country so whites can continue to exist and not breed out. There already is talks of Mexicans taking over the Southwest and claiming as their own, calling it Atlan. I've heard of it. Given the way things are going at this rate, do you think this could ever happen? Could states or even whole regions secede from the Union again if things got bad enough? What is your take on this whole Northwest Front idea? P.S. There's even a flag for it. Suggest using it for thumbnail video. Okay. It's not going to... Here's one thing. I don't think it'll happen like the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was basically bankrupt. I'm not morally, I mean financially bankrupt. And then individual former states that they had slowly taken over since the 30s, if my history is correct, they just said, yeah, fuck it, we're not part of this anymore. And the reason they could do that in the 90s, in the late 80s, is because the Soviet Union didn't have the money to finance an army to go and stop them and say, hey, you better come back. So it wasn't like the Hungarian revolts. It was the Czechoslovakia. Maybe it was both. Again, I have to check my history. But the United States, because we have the world's reserve currency, certainly can. And that happened once in the Civil War where the South wanted to secede. And basically the Union said, no, you're not. Which I never understood. Like a piece of country like Catalonia in Spain or Quebec or Scotland, they want to leave. Like, fucking leave. What do we care? Go. Be happy. We could still trade if you're that different. So I've never understood. And Britain, with Brexit, they left. But that's not necessarily a sovereign nation. Leaving, or part of one part of a country leaving and becoming a separate country. Britain was already a separate country. So, in the case of the United States, I think that the left in general would stop any kind of secession where basically the productive states would leave, or any kind of state says, fuck this, we're done supporting the parasites. So the actual genuinely productive states that produce things would leave. And then what would New York, I mean, seriously, what would New York do without Texas? What would California do without Colorado, the Dakotas, Montana, Idaho? I mean, what would happen? So it'd be violent if things started to secede. So what would have to happen is the country would have the nation, or the government would have to fall apart, be so horrendously and poorly financed, we'd lose the world reserve currency status, that basically the real economic power would go to different economic regions, kind of akin to what you're suggesting. Some people there was a Russian academic who suggested that the northern states, assuming Canada kept its shit together, which it won't because you guys got Trudeau, but there'd be like a Canadian kind of world, so like the Dakotas and Montana would be taken over by Canada. There'd be a northwestern kind of thing. Southwest would be taken over by Mexico, etc., etc. But as it comes to, let me just kind of read through, claim the area, once there's going to country continue on to exist and not breed out. There's always, given the way things are, do you think this could ever happen? So I don't think it would happen in that way, because it stays a whole, I don't think there'd be secession. But when it comes to race, and this is where I don't have the answer, but I'll give you several different scenarios. In short, because of the size of the population, and frankly our work ethic and labor productivity, I hate to say our because I have my own work ethic, and I know a ton of white people who have none whatsoever. In general, whites are the ones that make this economy go. They've made all of basically the world go. We've pretty much invented everything, and the work ethic is what pretty much everybody else either plagiarizes, piggybacks off of, or just hammocks off of, in the case of many other places. Now, of course, all different races, good and bad in all of them, and certainly there are some races where people work. They're all on Western civilization with Western culture. Let's go capitalism, hooray. But there is a correlation between minorities that, if you happen to be black or Hispanic, you don't have the work ethic. And you could blame it on racism or discrimination. In the end, you don't work as hard, you make stupid decisions, and you breed children out of wedlock at way higher rates. And you can pout and stammer your little feet. That is a decision that no matter what your race fucks over people. And if you want to see it, go to Wyoming. Because another thing that kind of throws a variable into it, whites ain't these like little holy people here. If you've noticed, every race has gone into the shitter. It just happens to be that blacks and Hispanics tend to be further down the rabbit hole or the coal mine than not. And this is where they kind of become the canaries in the mine. It's like, okay, if you want to continue down this road of socialism and we don't need fathers and we don't need the nuclear family, we just need the state, where does that lead? Well, look at Detroit, Flint, Michigan, Compton. There you go. So whites, though, also in all races, Asians and Jews are maintaining their levels pretty well, but whites are just becoming trailer trash and starting to spit out kids at rates blacks did no more than 30 years ago. So you really can't even see race. It would be culture or behaviors or decisions. Now, since things do correlate with race, blah, 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 and given the question in the context of your question, do I think something like the Northwest Front would survive or is viable or whatever you want? And I would say no in the short and medium and even long term. But yes in the super long term, but that's going to be more for environmental purposes. What I think will happen to the United States is as whites stop breeding, Asians breed less, Jews breed less, and minorities, Hispanics and blacks breed more. You're going to have more of a obviously diverse population, and we're going to basically become Brazil. And this has already kind of happened. Our debts are way up, our economic growth has collapsed. We're just going to become a second world shithole. And not necessarily, again, because of the race, but because of the culture different people choose to practice. Do you want to work hard? Do you want to, take ownership and responsibility and try and improve? Or do you want to blame everything on other people? And it's, I love fucking Venezuela, how they blame everything on the United States. That's classic. That's just classic. Or, you're in the ghetto and you spit out 5 kids. Oh, yeah, it's Whitey that kept you down, sweetheart. Yeah, because he forced you to spread your legs, have somebody impregnate you and you spit out kids. So, in any case, it's all going to generally decline like it is. You will see the elimination of Western culture. You will see this new, well, you can't even call it new, but socialism, cultural Marxism version 2.0. And the country as a whole will just become very average and very bland and very unexciting. I think you'll see a rise. The new global powers will be in Asia. Not because they maintain their ethnic identity or anything like that, but simply because they believe in hard work. They eschew illegitimate children. They kind of champion the nuclear family, and they're pursuing capitalist free market policies. So they would become the thing. But we're just going to become a big ass Brazil. That's all that's really going to happen. Now, what will happen, as I predict, is no matter how much cultural interdiversity, multiculturalism, kumbaya happens, as your productive class decreases, specifically whites, not only in terms of numeric population, but those that stop following Western culture and start taking in the socials. And this already happens. I mean, you can see this with the millennials. They're all about Bernie Sanders and not working. So again, we start to leave even the concept of race, and it's just like, what do you believe? Do you believe in supporting yourself? Do you believe in working? No? Okay, well. And an increasing amount of everybody starts to believe that, where they're entitled, and you're going to have less and less producers supporting more and more parasites. And what will inevitably happen, there will be an economic collapse, and that's where the big reset button happens. Because if there's an economic collapse, the entire population is so dependent on this fragile system of transportation, of goods and services, electricity, sanitary things. I mean, just talk to a civil engineer about how we're just one click away from, look at what happened with Flint. They had simply bad water. And that was a big, what happens if there's no water? What happens if there's no food? How long would Chicago last if you just cut off all the major interstates and put a naval blockade at every port and you just didn't allow goods and services to come into a population of 8 million. I mean, what would happen? So, without the productive classes, be you black, white, Hispanic, Asian, or whatever, without people working, everybody living on the government, the checks will start to bounce, chaos will ensue, a huge war will erupt. I don't even think it would necessarily fall along racial lines. I mean, certainly there would be people shooting each other based on what the color of their skin is. But I think there would be basically a producers versus parasites type of war going on. But when you're in the middle of a war, you can't say, hey, did you vote Republican? Oh, you did? Okay, cool, I won't. You didn't? There's no time for that. So in any case, getting to the larger point, I don't know if there'd necessarily be anyone left after this war. There'd be very few people left. I think China or some other much larger, more powerful, stable country will come in and take opportunity of that and just simply say, hey, it's ours, so there is no Northwest Front, there is no Aztlan, it's all New China, because they got the people and the manpower to do it. But if for some reason we're to get past that and post-collapse of Rome, and the Visigoths fought these people, and the barbarians fought those people, and then we fought the Moors, and all that other stuff was happening. When it all settled, what's ended up going to happening is going to be simple genetics and environment. You can never get rid of the white race. And the reason why is that let's take a family from the deepest, darkest parts of Africa. You have the darkest skin complexion, and you were to migrate and take over Sweden, which is happening now. You have Malmo. Okay, over, I guess, a couple thousand years, guess what's going to happen? I don't care how black your ancestors were, there ain't no fucking sun up in Sweden. It's cold, and your body will start to adapt, and guess what? You'll start to turn white. In other words, this is not a consequence of who my parents were, who bred before them, and who bred before them. This is the consequence that the vast majority of my ancestors came from cold climates that didn't have a lot of sun. If you talk to my buddy Marcus, the consequence of his skin, he's black, is that the majority of his ancestors came where there was a lot of sun, and you need to have basically a shield against the sun, and you had to have cooling. If you look at noses, blacks' noses are a little bit more. Their nostrils are wider, more cooling, more nasally for white folks because we want to keep the heat. So after a while, it's truly moot. The discussion of race is truly moot in the long run, because after a while, it is your environment that will determine what your skin color is going to be after enough generations. So that's why I say in the super long term, this is moot. There are going to be white people, there are going to be black people, and it's going to depend on what latitude you live on. But when it comes to the short, medium, and long term, the Northwest Front, I think the Northwest Front, I mean, if you get enough group of people together to form kind of a militia or an armed group of people that are well trained, they will hold their own, especially in a post-apocalyptic type world. They will have stability, they will have law, they will have protection, and then you can go ahead and start again. So yeah, there's some legitimacy in there, but I think that's at least 100 years out. And thankfully I'll be dead by that time. I'm so happy I'll be dead by that time that I won't have to see that. But it's not like because Hillary Clinton's going to get elected tomorrow or whatever, that all of a sudden the shit's going to hit the fan and we're going to be shooting everybody, and there's only going to be, out of the 300 million Americans left, there's only 1 million left, and hopefully 250,000 are up there in the Northwest. So I do like the idea of having networks. I hate to use the word militia because you get these, every militia's been like, who dang diggly dangly, let's go kill all the Jews kind of thing. But if you have networks, group of people, a tribe, and this is where Jack Donovan comes in. You should read Jack Donovan's book, The Way of Men. It explains very clearly, why you need, safety in numbers, groups of numbers, and what it means to have a tribe. But in terms of the political realities today, I mean, yeah, they can prepare in advance. That's fine. I think Mexicans, the ones that don't speak Spanish, but they still believe in loyalty to Mexico, they'll have the Southwest, and then I don't know who will have the East Coast. Whoever, it'll be a potpourri, but in short, yeah, I mean, you want to be careful, though. You don't want to become like one of these I'm not even saying white nationalists, because if we're going to have Black Pride, you can have White Pride. We're going to have Hispanic Appreciation Month, you can have White Appreciation Month. So, but when you're a white supremacist, I'd be careful if you're running around in that, like Stormfront, those type of people, because you're walking the thin line here. It's like, yeah, hey, wait, I'm white and everyone's discriminating against me. I'm the cause of all the evils in the world. So you're like, hey, we better group together here, not because we're superior, but because we have the right to exist. But when you start walking these realms, and I didn't look at Northwest Front, but you want to make sure they're not like, we're the only race and we're going to kill all the Jews, and because there's a guy who tried doing that before and he wasn't a terribly nice guy. But anyway, so yeah, that's what I think about it. I'm not against it. They kind of seem to want to keep to their own, I guess, based on what you described. But in terms of, seceding and all that, no, it's not going to happen. It's not. We're gonna turn into a big ass loser melting pot like Brazil, where we're just going to be lazy socialist fucks. And it actually has very little to do with race. It has to do with everybody wanting to be a socialist. That's really what it has to do, be with. So, just make sure you get yourself a good, scoped rifle for hunting deer and staying alive, and keep your survival skills up, I guess. Toodles.